Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Harlan. Good evening. My name is Harlan Limpert. I am a Unitarian Universalist minister, a volunteer for the organization Compassion and Choices, and co-founder of a group called Interfaith Clergy for End-of-Life Options. The Interfaith Clergy Group is a group of clergy from different Protestant denominations and rabbi who are in support of legislation that would allow each of us to make decisions about our end-of-life journey that is consistent with our own personal religious or spiritual beliefs. We're delighted that you're here tonight. We have almost 300 people that are signed up to participate, some in person here at the First Unitarian Society, and many of them are online. I want to welcome you to the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, the birthplace of Congregational Humanism. FUS carries on that tradition this evening as we strive towards the goal of truth, meaning, and justice. At Unitarian Universalist gatherings around the country, it is not uncommon that we begin our gathering with a pithy quote related to the topic of the evening or of the day. And tonight I'm going to open with a quote from the book, Finish Strong, Putting Your Priorities First at Life's End. This is a book that was written by Barbara Coombs-Lee, who is the former president and chief executive officer of Compassion and Choices. She continues to be very active in advocating for legislation throughout the nation that would give people the power to make decisions that are consistent with their own beliefs. The quote is this: "Living well and dying well are inseparable. The ingredients are the same, and with courage and intention, a well-lived life can flow naturally into a death that honors it and reflects the values and beliefs of a lifetime." And I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Rebecca Thoman. Rebecca?
Thank you, Harlan. My name is Dr. Rebecca Thoman, and I have two jobs at Compassion and Choices. I coordinate the Doctors for Dignity program, which brings together physicians around the country who support the mission of Compassion and Choices, which is to improve care, expand choice, and empower individuals to chart their own end-of-life journey. I also help coordinate the campaign in Minnesota for medical aid in dying, also known as the End-of-Life Options Act. And I have to say, we're just past the elections, and I think we're happy that we now have a more favorable legislature here in Minnesota, and we're hoping to make some progress on that legislation this year. However, that's not the topic for tonight. So first, I want to say how gorgeous is this view, and really thank First Unitarian Society for allowing us to use this beautiful space and to give us their really high, top-notch technicians to help us stream this live. So I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction, and then we're going to show a very short video featuring our guest today, and then we'll have them join us on stage for a Q&A. And I've got a few questions that I want to kick off the conversation with, and then we'll field questions from the audience after that. So you all will get a chance to speak and ask your questions and make your comments as the evening goes on. So I want to introduce our special guests this evening, who we're very thrilled to have with us again. Cheryl Hauser moved to Minneapolis in 1974 and then fell in love with the chain of lakes and the vibrant art scene here. She put down roots and raised her family here, and Cheryl was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2019. She's now focused on the people and activities that bring her joy. And part of what her mission is also to share with you her experience through Alzheimer's and her very, very important decision about choosing voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. Wendy Longacre Brown Cheryl's daughter, is a certified end-of-life doula and legacy creator. She was trained by the International End-of-Life Doula Association, and she provides emotional, educational, and spiritual support, honoring every path one might choose for their end-of-life journey. And she's a founding member of the Minnesota Death Collaborative. So before we launch into our program, I really wanted to set the stage, and just to be sure we're all on the same page and give you a little bit of information about the topic for tonight. So you may or may not know that it's Alzheimer's Awareness Month. I don't think any of us need our awareness about Alzheimer's raised. It is the most common topic that we hear at Compassionate Choices when we talk about end-of-life planning. And so we'll also use the word dementia. Dementia is a set of symptoms that affect memory and thinking and social abilities. There are multiple causes of dementia. Dementia can be caused, for example, by medication, so it's not always progressive. But Alzheimer's disease is a form of dementia. It's a progressive disease. So tonight we may be using those terms interchangeably, but we're talking specifically about the Alzheimer's forms of dementia, which is progressive. And it's characterized by a progressive loss of brain cells, resulting in loss of memory and language and cognition. 1 out of 2 Americans will die with some form of dementia at the time of their death. It's the 6th leading cause of death among seniors in the United States. There's no cure, although there are some medications to help manage symptoms. And the risk factors are the same risk factors for just about all diseases: your lifestyle, your health, your lifestyle factors, smoking, diet, exercise, and a little bit of genetics. So the average life expectancy after a diagnosis with Alzheimer's disease is 7 years. And Alzheimer's goes through progressive stages, which there are 7 or so stages. And in fact, the book that Harlan mentioned, Finish Strong, has a chapter on dementia. Chapter 8 is Escaping Dementia. And actually, Barbara walks through the various stages of dementia. But just sort of generally, at the beginning, it starts with a simple memory loss and the inability to perform complicated functions, and then progresses to greater memory loss, word loss, difficulty completing activities of daily living, such as shopping or dressing, and then subtle personality changes as well. And this progresses ultimately to the most severe form of dementia, where someone may actually they may lose awareness of their surroundings, be unable to walk or eat, and have unintelligible speech. So those are the far most extensive forms of Alzheimer's. And I'm guessing many of you here have known someone or cared for someone with Alzheimer's disease. If you have, raise your hand. Like I said, it's the number one concern of people that we talk to as they're thinking about planning for the end of life. So voluntary stopping eating and drinking is what we're going to be talking about tonight also, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the willful decision to stop all eating and drinking with the intention of hastening death. You might think of it as something that, and we've seen this before in cancer patients who are progressive in their disease, they're very weak, they've lost their hunger anyway, and they may just decide, I'm done, I'm just going to stop eating and drinking, and then they will slowly die 5 to 7 days from dehydration. This is voluntarily stopping eating and drinking is legal. It's legal in every state. But it's really critical that you have the proper medical support as you go through voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. There's a wide range of experiences we've heard reported, but with the right care, it can be a good experience. And that's what Wendy and Cheryl are going to share a little bit about, is the importance of planning and what they have been doing to plan. So before you leave, I wanted to point out that Compassionate Choices has created some tools to help people make plans for a possible dementia diagnosis. And it's an online tool. We also have some hard copies in the back. It walks you through the stages of a progressive disease and asks, what level of care do you want as your disease progresses? And documenting that in writing is very, very important, because if the disease progresses, there may come to a point where they will rely on your advance directive to know what it is that you want. It's also really helpful. It reassures the people who may be helping you, your family or loved ones who are going through the VSED process, to reassure them. And we had an experience with one of our advocates who died a little over a year ago. She had ovarian cancer. She was fighting very hard for the medical aid in dying legislation, but it didn't pass. And she died by stopping eating and drinking. And her daughter was with her through the whole thing. And it was very important that Marianne is her name. Marianne's brother was able to go back to Marianne's daughter and show her, Marianne wanted this. She wrote this down. And it was really important for her daughter to feel comfortable and confident that she was doing the right thing. So there's a resource table in the back, and I invite you all to take a look at it. There are a couple things that are just for display, but information about how to obtain those. And we have 3 copies of Barbara's book in the back. A new version has been issued, so those are now out of date, but contain much of the same information. So don't push and shove, but you're welcome to take those with you. So now we're going to move on to the program, and we're going to start with a very short video that Cheryl and Wendy made for us as part of a longer project. We have the extreme honor of walking through this experience with them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So let's go to the video.
I'm Wendy Brown. I'm 49 and live in Minneapolis. And I am the daughter of a beautiful mother.
My name is Cheryl Hauser. I am 75 years old. I have lived in Minneapolis virtually all of my life, and I have Alzheimer's. In 1974, we moved from New York City. We had taken a camping trip and we fell in love with the lakes. We didn't do a lot of research. We just had, you just had this sort of, just this thing of, this is our place. And then we settled in Minnesota and found a life.
So my mom's brother, Will, he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's about 7 years before you were diagnosed. And it glued our family together even more so.
My brother, Will, was in a facility not too far from us, and he realized that he was going into another facility, and he went ballistic. He tried to get out of the car. He was opening the car on the highway, just trying to get out. He was so scared. I could not have helped in any way, because David is a bigger guy, and so he just went ahead and just pulled him back so he couldn't get out of the car. Because if he could have, he would have fallen out of the car and died. I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2019. I was not surprised because I knew my brother's history. I could not fold laundry, I couldn't find the buttons on the microwave, I couldn't read, I couldn't write. When I get up in the morning, David will be down here and we will sit together in front of the fire and visit and talk, and then I suddenly say, I don't know what I'm doing, and I can't make sense of anything. I just can't make sense. So then, and then what happens initially is that I'm feeling dumb and stupid, which is, crap. I am a strong woman, and I've been very successful. I do believe in being open to what is next. Because I saw my brother experience the whole realm, I knew right away that I would not allow anybody to take my dignity, because it's my body, it's my choice. And he was just too out of it by that point. He couldn't make another choice, but I can. One of the things that I have picked up that I would not have done before was painting. So I love the idea of canvases. They're totally abstract. I love color, and I turn on music. There's so little I can do. So when I do go to the easel, then I'm all excited. And then I stay excited. And then I just stop, and then I sort of walk back and say, that's so cool.
VSED, VSED, stands for Voluntarily Stopping Eating and Drinking. I had first learned about VSED when I was considering being a doula for death. I learned about Phyllis Schachter's story, Choosing to Die. And when I read her story about supporting her husband, Alan, with VSED, I actually handed the book to my mom, who had not been diagnosed with Alzheimer's yet.
Once I read Phyllis's story of VSED, it wasn't even a thought for me. I just knew that this was the right thing to do, and how you can gather your family and have this experience. I knew very quickly that that was how I wanted to die. I was very clear about it.
2 years after Mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, there was an article written in the Star Tribune about Mom's choice to VSED. When Compassion and Choices contacted us after they had learned about Mom's choice, we knew right away that it was a group that we would want to be a part of and support their guidance and truly belief that everyone should have their own choice around end of life. So many people are unaware that VSED is an option around end of life. Many people are aware of death with dignity and may be aware that they should be looking at how to support that in our state. And as that's happening, what people don't see is that VSED is already legal. And truly, the earlier you bring it into the conversation with anyone who might even fathom the idea of not living their full life with Alzheimer's, then it should be a part of the conversation for them to understand, potentially get comfortable with, and see what other support is needed.
Part of what I have been doing in the process of this is to educate people so that they know they have choices.
Using the Compassion and Choices toolkit helped reinforce how I was able to support Mom with this diagnosis, as well as consider using VSED to end her life in a dignified manner.
Welcome. I'd like to welcome Wendy and Cheryl up to the stage. You get the comfy chairs.
And then you're just going to like spread out here? Is that the idea?
So I always start with the first impression that I have of Cheryl, which is she looks so fantastic and vibrant and beautiful and full of life. But it's also a bit of a mask in a way. I mean, it's who she is, but there's a lot of experience in her life that we may not be aware of. So I'm wondering if you could inform people more about what your Alzheimer's disease experience has been like, and maybe the parts of it that we don't see when we look at you here up on stage.
I usually don't need a microphone because I speak really loudly. What was your question? Wait a second, it was about...
What is the Alzheimer's experience like for you that we don't see? When we see you here tonight up on stage and you look so beautiful and you're so outgoing, but what's going on inside of you? Because people would look at you and say, stop eating and drinking, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. But it's not crazy.
It's not crazy. It's not crazy. And typical kind of day for me is, a little closer? Yeah. Okay. A typical morning would be when I would sleep. I love to sleep, and I sleep very long and hard. It's sort of my go-to place because I'm feeling like I don't know what to do. I literally do not know what to do. So David at some point brings up some English cup of tea, and then we sit near the fire, and we talk about the day, and then this has been progressive now for a long time, that I just sit down and I don't know what to do. And I know, like, my wonderful Sue, who happened to come over that morning, and she said, well, we could do this, we could do that. And I said, no, I just want to sit here and cry. I think it's so important to really go deep with tears, because this is a fucking disease. It just is. It's the worst. So what do? Then I paint, then a friend would come over and we would go for a little walk or something. But I'm exhausted from this. I mean, and again, I have no fear of death at all. That's a huge thing. And I've done work in therapy around it. Mm-hmm. I walked the Camino de Santiago. It took many, many days and like a month, and that was so healing, so healing. And we all have different stories around what do you bring in to your world, and what you're bringing in to this world for other people. So my thing about Alzheimer's and about VSED is that, yes, it's my story, but it's really not my story. I want to educate people, and that's why you're doing this work, because it's so important. And even if you're sort of freaked out, even if you don't know, I mean, my husband and I, we've been members of Methodist Church and a variety, but that's not the same. I mean, my God is really in nature. So, if we don't feel like getting up and going to find a church someplace, we end up saying, well, let's go outside and look at the what is it?
The colors.
Oh, the colors, yes. But more about going out and seeing God in nature. Because that can be so fulfilling and so warm.
Can I interject for 1 second?
Of course.
And just to follow up with what people don't see is that if you have an outgoing afternoon with a friend and you still might have memories of a gathering years ago, or you can remember bits about a movie you just watched, even though you're going to watch it 4 more times again because you won't remember it. Some of the hardest parts is really that not knowing what to do, what people don't see what to do with a brain that can't put logic together of what am I supposed to be doing right now sitting on your island, sitting at you, and I, even if we try to go into detail about, or not even detail, just in general, help you get comfortable with it's okay not knowing. That's even challenging for you, Mom. I'll gently, simply try to explain how about just letting it go and not caring. And that's hard for you to understand because everyone's Alzheimer's shows up differently. But in Mom, in her particular case, she's always thinking. There's always something next. It's hard for her brain to sit still. So I think this time is one of the most challenging right now, I'd have to say.
And doing things such as, and this is just a classic example, that we were going to have a couple over for dinner, and I went to get the silverware and to go into the dining room. I had no idea what to do with the silver. I had no idea where it goes. I just don't know. And when I don't know, I go to that place of I'm stupid, I'm incompetent, and then I'm just a mess for the day, Because, all of us have led different kinds of lives and what we've done and all of that. But in the bottom line, it's you and your loved ones who are going to help you figure this out and do it with joy and do it with dignity and do it with music and all of those things. There are ways to do this that are not painful. And maybe Wendy can talk a little bit about.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Why don't you?
I've got my own microphone.
Okay,
You can
go.
keep that one. I was going to ask you to talk a little bit more about how you decided that VSED was the right option for you. I know you have your own personal experience, family experience
Yes.
with Alzheimer's disease. So what was the process that you and your family went through in considering this as an option and deciding it was right for you?
Well, it was a no-brainer. It was absolutely a no-brainer because my brother, who lived in Ely, he was scared to death. He was not getting support. And so, Wendy saw him age and be so confused, and I did, and then my other daughter, Sarah, would be there. And the thing is that all you can do is love somebody into the rest of your life or in the forever life. It's so important to express the love that we have instead of, oh, I'm in such pain and blah, blah, blah. No, it's just part of life. And I'm not afraid. Of course.
I felt it was interesting to share this because, Mom, your love of life also led you to taking the Speaking of Dying course, which is what also I took as well, which is basically an in-depth 4-class scenario where you're actually the woman who taught it is here today, a facilitator named Laurel Rydell, and we both took this class. And part of the reading list was Phyllis Schwachter's book, Choosing to Die. So that was one of the first introductions that we both had around VSED. She, I believe, was one of the first people to really come out with a story of how she supported her husband, Alan. But I also want to point out that even, Mom, you filled out the 5 wishes and took the Speaking of Dying course before you knew you had Alzheimer's. But when we were recently going through some paperwork that Mom had given me, and one of the homework assignments was about basically stating how you felt about like the specifics on how you wanted to die, and not how long you wanted to be on necessarily a respirator or where you wanted your ashes spread. But you already had this knowledge that this is what you wanted to do, which I think is helpful. And you made statements like, I do not want a prolonged life plugged in suffering. I do not want, I want to prepare for a good death. I want my doctors to do less than more. Healthcare's default to promote, basically you said like, I don't want to continue my life on any kind of machines. Like you knew you wanted to have more of a rich life, potentially, with or without Alzheimer's. So you already knew that this was, without even knowing that VSED was an option. You had stated before that you were not willing, you wanted to have a life that was more honorable to how you've lived. And I think that is ultimately, you didn't want to be in a home. And not everybody has that option. I understand, but I think like you ultimately you knew you wanted to die at home, and you knew you wanted to die with people around you and being a part of the death if you had that option.
And seeing was it your brother who had Alzheimer's disease, and seeing him go through that must have also had an impact on your decision.
Well, and so much more for Wendy, because you were so involved in his dying, and you were saying that's not how we should be doing this.
To some aspect. I mean, his dying was what he needed to do. I think it was painful to see the uncle that was not the person that I knew. And he would look at us saying, like, I don't know, why am I here? I never thought I would be in this facility. And then he'd go back in with not being able to recognize us. And so I think part of, you're doing this for yourself, but you're also doing it for the people that you love around you, because you're not wanting us to see you in that way.
How have the people around you, your loved ones, your medical team, how have they responded to this idea?
Well, one of the really, really cool things my daughters did for me was to have a gathering of my closest friends and in the backyard, and it was just so joyful. One of the best afternoons ever, because it was also a very warm day, the last warm day of Minnesota. Holding on to it. But the people, see, what I had wanted to say is that that one of my strongest feelings about how you do things is that, what is it? It's the thing that I love. It's the,
Let me pick up and then you can jump in. How about?
no, because I think I have it.
Okay.
No, it's the quote, because this was all for women. And the quote that I have often used all the time is, the worst pain you can experience is having a story that you have not told. That's big. So when you have a group of people and you want to tell your story, could be women or men, but for me, it was being surrounded by my loved ones who just, I needed to tell them thank you for all that you have given me, no matter how long I live. But I do believe that, because my parents died in a plane crash, and that was in 77, but it was the world's largest plane crash, actually. And that I want, wait a second, I have things to say, I just don't remember. But it was, but I wanted to acknowledge that particularly women, that we get to connect with our other women, because that's where we get our strength and that's where we get our joy. Yeah. I mean, I like men too.
You have lots of men friends. One, I think, important part of your decision to VSED was that it was about a year before you were diagnosed that you read this VSED book, and you said, that's no question, that's if I do have Alzheimer's, which you kind of had a sense at that point that you may.
Oh, there was so much I couldn't even do that.
Yeah. So I think it was in the conversation with our family and a small amount of friends that, Mom has decided this is what she wants to do. And even after she was diagnosed, I waited until Mom approached me to say, so I still want to VSED. And that was in June 2019. That fall, we met with your internist, and you shared that this was how you wanted to hasten death. And even though you had this long-term relationship with her, she was a little hesitant, which is not a surprise. And she said, it can be difficult. People say they want to do it, but it doesn't always happen. But Mom was determined, right? And I'd say 2 months after.
And you're so clear too. I mean, you weren't going to pull back, because this was a decision that we had made.
And your partner was also very supportive of it. So I think it can happen without a supportive husband, but I think it really is helpful to have, if it's children, your partner, a community. 2 months after we met with your internist, she had referred us to hospice, and hospice came over, and we walked through what that would look like. And that was 3 years ago. Yeah.
So how have you been planning and preparing for the day when, Cheryl, when you stop eating and drinking? What are you doing right now to prepare for that? And how will you decide when it's time?
one of the most asked questions, I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, we had read enough about and listened to enough stories about the steps to take, be it that you write a VSED statement, which I brought, which I think is also really interesting to see what things mom can and cannot do still. And we will shoot small videos of mom's statement of why she's deciding to VSED. So once we begin the process, if she's questioning it, we can remind her verbally why she's doing this, and we also, we will give her alternatives to, if it's because you're thirsty or because she just is forgetting what she's doing in this bed with people around her. We will have short and long videos for her to understand why she is doing this, and she'll. But ultimately, she.
And lots of music.
And yeah, lots of music. So we kind of have those things just to make sure that it's successful. We'll also have private care for the 7 to 10 days or longer that it takes. We'll have hospice in and out. Mom will have a list of friends that she's wanting to visit.
No, they need to come to me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm in the bed.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of it right now is that window. I mean, there's been times a couple months ago where at one point mom stated, for the last maybe 5-6 months, you've thought March of next year. March is the month. And then a few months ago, you said you were having a few difficult days in a row, and you said it might be as early as January, February. So we're, it's a fragile but beautiful time it's why we wanted to have this joining of good friends so people could meet all the other friends that mom has been talking about and hear all the stories. It's basically what, it was like a mini memorial service, but with mom present. Yeah. Is there anything you want to add to that?
So I just wanted to talk a little bit more, some specifics about going through the VSED process. And the first 2 or 3 days, the biggest problem tends to be thirst. And any amount of liquid will prolong the experience, so you really want to avoid any liquids at all. But the hunger is usually pretty easy to get over. The hunger is fine, but it's the thirst that becomes the biggest issue. And then after about the 3rd or 4th day, you start to become sleepy and a little bit disoriented. And that's when hospice or whoever will bring some medications in to help calm you down, keep you comfortable. And then it's really the last 3 days when the sleeping is pretty much full-time, around the clock. There's lots of sleeping as you move to that final stage before death. So have you talked about walking through those 10 days and thinking with the team about medication, support, and what are you going to do when she's thirsty, or what if you become a little disoriented and forget what you're doing here and say, hey, I want something to drink, but just kind of thinking about that level of support that you may need.
Yeah. I was fortunate to be a doula for a 40-year-old man who VSED'd in June. So I had firsthand experience of being with him. It took him 11 days to die. He was younger, and it was Huntington's disease. It wasn't Alzheimer's. So he just had a younger, stronger heart. So it took him a bit longer, but there was a lot of communication with the nurses beforehand, and will be with right now, as far as mom is concerned, I'm figuring out with a contact where I know her care team. We really want to make sure that we do it close enough to the actual VSED that we know they're available. So sort of selecting who those individuals would be, that they're 110% supportive of this. And having those conversations of all the options to make sure that mom is comfortable. And so if she is thirsty, to know that you have we have sprays. You really can't, if you haven't, there's different studies and different thoughts on ice chips or not. I've just seen that can continue life a little bit longer. And so really it's making sure that you have enough morphine to just take any anxiety off. Mom isn't really on, aside from, an antidepressant and a sleeping pill, not a lot of drugs in her system. So I think that will, she'll be able to really take in and accept some of that morphine. So what we still need...
And also during that process, because anybody who's here who knows me, it's all about music for me. So that I want access to all kinds of music.
Right.
During the process, before the process, and even as I'm dying. I feel
Big
very
music
good
party.
about that.
But I think one thing is it's similar to a birth plan that you can, mom can say right now, well, I'd like to be more alert versus a little bit more drugged. And then she might decide, no, I am more anxious right now, and we can have, I think the conversations between myself, my sister, my brother, David, the team that's watching her, basically my hope is that we'll have 2, maybe 3, maybe a night nurse that's somebody else, but 2, 3 max private nurses, so they really can be observing and noticing mom for the entirety of the actively dying process. So between that and then having hospice when we need to make a medical shift, when we need to have a new prescription, you can get that in a matter of hours, so that's helpful.
And just knowing Cheryl a little bit, I'm guessing you have your wardrobe selected, the music tape all selected, the candles, the incense.
Yeah.
The senses, everything. They're so cute.
Well, we'd like to open it up and let folks in the audience ask questions that maybe I haven't thought of. As you're listening to Cheryl and Wendy, come on up. Harlan is going to handle the microphone, but because he recently had a knee replacement, he's not going to run around like Oprah. So if you all would just stand up and come to him so we can all hear your question, that would be great.
Are there any questions? Please, if you don't mind, come on up. Well, please come up. So, no, please
We
come
want
up.
the microphone.
It'll
For the people who are streaming, it's for
make
their
it better.
benefit.
People will be able to hear you more clearly.
Well, I was confused, first of all, just so you know that ahead of time. So if medication can be given in this situation, it must be done then intravenously. In that sense, if we're trying to stop the drinking or trying to stop liquid from going in. First of all, is that correct? Secondly, excuse me, is I didn't realize that a hospice can be a part of this. And when you said maybe I was reading into it, is there a bit of pushback in this, in the sense of when we say it's voluntary, but at the same time we're saying yes to some medication?
Great questions. I feel we were fortunate that Mom's hospice team was on board right away. I don't think it's like that with every hospice group. For instance, when I was looking for, Mom is going to VSED at home. But if that isn't an option and you're looking at hospice homes, it took me a while for this client that I had in June to look at kind of the 8 or 9 options and to kind of see, 3 are really the best. The other 4 were a little bit on the fence. And so you do have to do some research to make sure that your hospice team is on board, be it small or private or large. But I do trust that, and sometimes it's about who you speak with. If Mom's internist was like, not so much, I would have gone to another doctor. Because there are, and that's not unlike medical aid in dying. Sometimes you have to have the right doctor in a state where it's legal. So it is, but I also know of hospices that they'll say, we'll start on day 3, not in day 1. Because at that point, the organs are beginning to not quite fail, but the body is more distressed. As far as medications go, we did a combination of, he did swallow in the back of his mouth, so that didn't delay. He swallowed pills without any liquid, He would just be able to put them in the back of his mouth, and then we would spray, like 2 sprays right after every time he had medication. And that was okay. It worked. But he did not have an IV, clearly. And so, yeah, it really, I think, if there's a will, you will figure out how to do it. I mean, you just have to, that's why the planning is really helpful. I'd say if it was once someone's diagnosed, or if you feel like there is Alzheimer's in my family, I want to make sure that we're with it, that we have a health team, or that that my healthcare agent is also very clear about this. Like, you just need to make that statement, and then you put it aside and live your life.
More questions?
Please come on. If you don't mind, why don't you just line up if you have a question that you'd like to raise. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. I'm just curious about, just like anything else that you've asked of your healthcare agent, and the family knows that and they agree, but have you seen a situation in which your, I don't want to say subject or patient or whatever, what if they change their mind? It's like if you're falling out of a building and halfway down you change your mind, I don't want to do this. How do you as a family member react?
Well, if you change your mind during the midst of it, I think it really just depends on how far along you are in the process, and sometimes, and if your body is already starting to fail. But if you change your mind, you change your mind. It's your, no one's going to force this person to continue to not eat or drink. That's their choice.
Have you seen other family members who say, no, this is what mom wants?
Right.
Say, yeah.
I have.
Part of the family dynamics.
Yeah, I have read stories, and I have heard of scenarios and spoke with families that are in the process of planning what their VSED statements would be, and so they're discussing it. Like this one particular family I'm working with, they know that one of their 3 children would probably have a difficult time in supporting, even though they eventually they might, but I think they're not going to be their go-to. But it is why people have signed documents, and because ultimately you want to have this safeguard around the home that you're starting to VSED. And so if there are friends, I think like in Phyllis's situation, she had one friend and a nurse that tried stopping it. And so I think it can happen. But the hope is that you have weeded out those people beforehand, so you're aware of who could bring in that negative energy, because that's okay to have that opinion, but that doesn't mean this is going to stop your loved one from doing what they want to do. And I think too, as long as the legality part of it is that you want to make sure that like the social workers involved are on the same page.
So other questions come on down, but I did want to point out that the book that Wendy's referring to, Choosing to Die by Phyllis Schachter, we have one copy of that out on the table. It's just for display, but if you want to take a picture of it, if you want to get the information on that, we do have that, so you can get the information if you want to get a copy of the book.
I have a very practical question, but I also want to thank you for your willingness to share this very intimate story. And but in a very practical way, if one has a healthcare directive, is there anything special that one should add to a healthcare directive to pave the way for VSED?
I'll take this one.
Sure.
Actually, that is the tool that Compassion and Choices has created. It's an online tool for creating your advanced care directive for dementia. So, and we have some information about that also on the table. We have a booklet for end-of-life planning, and there's a section in there for the dementia addendum, which helps you specifically talk about what it is you want at various stages or with other manifestations of the disease, what level of care you might want. So we have it online, and you can go to compassionandchoices.org and search for tools to finish strong, and that will take you to the page with those materials. You can do them online. And we also have the booklet. You'll see that if you look at the table on your way out. Not that one, the big one. There's one copy of it. It's a display booklet, but it shows you what the dementia addendum looks like. And I have little cards there. If you want copies of those, let us know. Or you can also download it online. So we do have those tools, and that's the whole point, is to emphasize the need to plan. And the other comment I wanted to make about getting a supportive healthcare team is that it's very important to ask about the religious affiliation of your medical team, your provider, your institution, and your hospice. Because religiously affiliated people or institutions may not support this option. And you may not realize that it's a religiously affiliated institution. So it's very important to ask that right up front, including the individual providers who may be caring for you.
Hi. I'm a director of memory care and a dementia educator. So first of all, I want to thank you so much for giving us your energy tonight and deciding to write the final chapter of your life as an educator, because people having these choices is so important. So thank you so much. I was just wondering, when you talked to your friends, when you had your girlfriends over and had time, I just think about how so many family members struggle with the death of a loved one or a friend. And, were there times where you really had to try to help a friend through this decision that you're making? And how did you do that?
Well, it is interesting in that people respond to me in a way that is their style, so that I have to listen to what they're saying, because they may be saying, oh, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay. And, I've had to have those times when I say, no, fuck, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, so she'll say, oh, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay. So then I have to say, no, that's actually not helpful. What I would rather have you say, I am so sorry, and I love you. Those are the words that mean a lot, right? Yeah. Yep.
Well said.
Thanks.
And thankfully, I guess Mom has been fortunate that you haven't had too many friends that have fought for you not to, have argued against the idea of VSEDing.
That's right. Because some people, if they're very religious or they're doing something else, they'll say, no, only God decides when you're going to die. That's not my God.
And I also think that it could be a small group of friends that know. Not everybody has to know. I mean, the client that I had in June, it was a very small group of people, because that's just how they decided. And at the same time, it was, I think, because it was so positive that his wife said, I will speak to anybody about VSED, and please share his story. So it's really extremely personal.
I just wanted to comment, and I invite you to also comment, Wendy, about the fact that often when you start the process of VSED, you don't qualify for hospice, because you're not, hospice is a Medicare benefit, and you have to be within 6 months prognosis. And Cheryl does not have a 6-month prognosis. And other forms of neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's, Huntington's, where people might choose to VSED, at some point that Wendy mentioned, 3-4 days in, then you are qualifying for hospice support. So, but talking to the hospice team in advance, even though you may not officially qualify for hospice, at some point along this journey, they can come in and start to offer support and care. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was well. And I thought it might be helpful just to hear, because that addendum to a healthcare directive I think is really helpful. And so I thought I'd just quickly read Mom's addendum. Like, so this is something that you pretty much were stating before. This was the first round of your VSED statement, but you stated, due to my Alzheimer's disease, I would like to begin the VSED process when I lose the ability to have logical conversations and my communication begins to become limited. We're getting closer to that. When I lose the ability to understand and be engaged in what is going on around me, often feeling confused. When I need assistance when getting dressed in daily functions around my home, doing laundry, running dishwasher. This is why we made a second one of these, because Mom is unable to do that, but she still is living and wanting to live. When I become exhausted while engaging in daily activities, attending church, visiting with friends, going to museums, when I begin to get lost in familiar locations. And then you continue on to say, it basically just kind of bullet points of how you want to die. I want to only receive care in the place where I'm currently living, not in a hospital. Mom does have a pulse that has been filled out for about 6 months.
Do you know what the pulse is?
I can share that, yeah. I do not want to receive food or water during VSED, only wetness on my lips. I want to receive medication for pain management only, especially helpful for agitation, anxiety, and rest. I would like to be touched, sung to, read to, and hear music. I am aware of the potential strong sucking reflex. Please know this is not due to hunger or thirst. If anything prolongs dying, I do not want it. I ask for liquids to be decreased during the days before VSED begins to help smooth the process. This important decision comes from my strong beliefs and cognitive thinking mind, wanting to die with dignity and grace.
I said that?
You sure did.
I was just going to ask, could you
Yeah.
tell me more about that?
Yeah.
Do we have, somebody's coming down with a question. While they're coming forward, oh, David, go ahead. Cheryl's beloved.
I have a comment because I'm Cheryl's executive chef, her chauffeur, her dresser. In other words, I'm her husband, right? So that's my role. I wanted to make a comment on because of some of the questions that were asked. And the one thing, of course, having been a part of the journey since 2019, and when Cheryl made the decision to VSED, she's never wavered one moment from that decision. So there's never been any doubt in her mind because we've talked about it, and I've asked her how she felt about it, and so she's been very, 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 very true to that. The other part of that, of course, is the backstory, and I was just saying to these two people here that when you hear her being so articulate, you are actually experiencing Cheryl at her very best. This is who she is. This is her gregarious personality, and she rises to the occasion, and she loves it, and it's beautiful to see. But what is behind it all, in what you don't see, is the fact that apart from watching television and speaking and communicating, there is nothing else she can do. I mean, virtually everything she needs assistance with. So I only say that to understand that there's such emotional pain that she experiences, and the waking up in the morning and mentally being in a fog, and then the feelings of incompetence. All of these things cause such emotional pain, and that's what is increasing, and that is what eventually will end up saying, okay, I'm ready. So I just wanted to share that backstory for you all. Yeah.
Well, the next person is coming up with a question. I just wanted to mention that we're so grateful that Wendy and Cheryl have agreed to allow Compassion and Choices to document their experience, and the video you saw is the first part of that. And we're hoping to document more of the experience as they actually go through this, that they're graciously allowing us to use as a teaching tool, because there is so much curiosity around VSED. and because they're so committed to empowering people. There is also a documentarian, I don't know if they're here, making an artistic film about Cheryl and this journey. That'll be artistic and beautiful, and at film exhibits. What are they called?
Film festivals.
Film festivals. Thank you. I'm in the early stages, but ours will be kind of a learning tool. But those are huge gifts that Cheryl and Wendy and the family are bestowing on all of us. Is there a question?
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank you for just saying that, because you do look so good. And I'm going like, when you were saying February, March, I'm going like, really?
No, I mean, when I know, I will know. I will know.
Yeah, so I have one practical question, and then back to this issue of knowing when to start. Is with morphine, can't you have a nurse come in and give you a shot?
A shot of
morphine. I mean, do you have to swallow? I mean,
there's options. I mean, you could. That is an option. We didn't with my other client, but yeah.
Okay, because you were just talking about pills.
Yeah, I think it really just depends on your nurse, and it depends on how comfortable mom would be. But yeah, it's an option.
Because I'm all about comfort.
Yeah. You can have as much morphine as you want.
Okay,
I'm
gonna
to an
write that in
extent.
my-
I'm not trying to push drugs at all. But
no,
it's
nor
not-
me as a person who doesn't do much. But when it comes to dying, anyway. But so this last part of your conversation has been helpful because it seemed like sort of premature. But maybe you could speak more to, is Cheryl going to be the decider of exactly when this starts, or is it because Alzheimer's can just totally, make it impossible for you to make any decisions at all? Do you want the family to be involved? I'm like, how does, in terms of starting the process?
Yeah.
I guess that's my question is,
Right. And
what's
I will
that
know,
about?
I will know, but every day is a little different. Like Sue came over, one of my besties, and we were going to go do something, and then I just looked at her, and then we just sat and cried. So every day is different, and I think it's also. Oh, what was I going to say? It was pretty profound. Yeah. I can't remember now.
It's a group effort. I would say we're taking a lot of our cues from mom, but we're in constant conversation about what we're observing. Clearly, we want to make sure this happens for her, so we're not wanting to lose that window of time before she is unable to make that decision. I feel that it's much more, as David was sharing, more of the emotional drain that will help us decide and support her, because mom will know, but she's also she often looks at us and asks, how will I know? Will you tell me? When will I know? So we go in, so I don't know how I'm going to look back on this in the next 2 years after you die, mom, and think, why didn't you see it then? It was so clear. Oh my gosh, she died 8 months after we had this conversation today. We don't know, but we have to just continually take the cues that mom is still able to make a decision, and where is she finding joy in her life, and if there is no more purpose, and I think that's ultimately when mom just isn't wanting to be social. I think we've talked enough about when she's not wanting to leave, when she's not wanting to see friends as much, but she's still able to make these decisions. We're much closer to that time. And then I will probably say, okay, if it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks before that time, and she might change her mind, but I don't think she will push that. And we've talked about that a little bit, because that can be draining for everybody, and you want to make sure your team is ready.
Right. And my gift in terms of my children, because I have Wendy, Sarah, David, and me, and Blake, yes, and that I can go to them I can go to them and immediately they will say, okay, because I tear up so easily. So I can walk into her home and I'll just go, blah, because I need somebody to hold me. It's about holding somebody that you love. So do lots of hugging.
So
Rebecca, may I ask that you say a little bit about the differences between VSED and medical aid in dying and why one might be a preferred option from the other?
Sure. Before I say that, I wanted to add that if you do miss the window of opportunity, that all is not completely lost, because there are other ways that there are natural exits for people with dementia also. Illnesses that you may not treat, emergencies that you may not respond to, and even minimal feeding. So that's the other important part of your advance directive. If you don't voluntarily stop eating and drinking, there are ways that you can limit the level of care that you get, which will at least shorten the time of duration that you may be living with Alzheimer's. And thank you, Harlan was asking me to just clarify the difference between medical aid in dying and VSED. So medical aid in dying is very, very specific only for terminally ill people with a 6-month prognosis who have full decision-making capacity. So someone with Alzheimer's would not qualify for that, because by the time they're 6 months away from death, they've lost decision-making capacity. It's not something you can put in your advance directive because an advance directive kicks in after you've lost capacity and an agent is now deciding for you. So medical aid in dying is only during those, for people who are in that situation. And indeed, the people who use it the most have cancer or ALS or another neurologic disorder where they have full cognition, but they're dying from their disease. In states where that is legal, that is an option. In Minnesota, for example, now, we don't have medical aid in dying yet. And someone who is in the situation with ALS or cancer could choose to stop eating and drinking. So it is an option in Minnesota for people today, whereas medical aid in dying is not. But it would never be an option for someone in Cheryl's situation because she would not qualify for that. Just to clarify that, because sometimes there's confusion. We have time for one more audience question, so make it good. There you go.
It sounds like you have such a broad team. And I think some of us will not be that fortunate to have such a broad team and everyone thinking together. But morphine, how do you get morphine?
Through hospice.
Through a hospice. But the comfort things that, that make it a dignified death.
Mm-hmm. And there's lots of other ways to make it a dignified death too, not just the drugs. It's brushing the hair, it's washing the face, it's doing, washing the whole body, having healing touch going on. So there's multiple options for comfort and distraction for a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of music.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wendy, can you plug death doulas and their role for people who maybe don't have?
Sure. If you have an option to bring an end-of-life doula on to something like this, I think it can be really helpful to be able to provide emotional support and education to the family so people can play the roles that they should be able to, be it spouse or friend or sibling or child. Because that's ultimately, you want to be showing up next to your person in the role that you are versus the caretaker. So a death doula can help with that. I also think I've had multiple conversations with people that have thought that their parent wanted to do VSED, or they definitely said, yeah, I don't want to live the full life with Alzheimer's. But I think a death doula can help have those conversations and really be able to say, all right, I've attempted gently 3 times to talk to your parent, and they're fighting it. They really have to be on board, and I'm happy to come back again to talk to them. So I think just it helps a family member understand that this is actually something that their loved one can do, and that's just my experience. But yeah, death doulas or anybody, you don't have to be a death doula to be support. It just, I think you have to have a reliable, good friend to be able to help you through this process.
So we're just about out of time, so before we end, I want to do a shameless plug, which is that Compassion and Choices is completely dependent on donations from people like you who benefit from our programming. So if you're inspired to give tonight, you can go to compassionandchoices.org/donate and give at whatever level you desire that shows your support for these kind of educational efforts. But so finally, I want to give you all a last word before we express our great gratitude for you for being here tonight. What would you like to say to the audience at the close of this evening?
Surround yourself with people who love you, who know you, ask for what you want. Amen.
I would say it's never too early to plan at any age.
Never too
Never too early to plan.
yeah.
And ultimately have conversations about death with your friends and your loved ones. Again, it is something that unfortunately in this culture it's a bit taboo, and the more that we talk about it and the more that you share tonight and the options that are there, the more that people can be experiencing living each day and knowing that people can be prepared and family and friends can be prepared if something unexpected happens.
So please join me in thanking Wendy and Cheryl for this evening. And the recording will be available online at the First Unitarian Society.